She's standing between you and your power, and reminds me, Odd, what do we do to those who stand in our way?
No. We destroy them, my queen.
All right, welcome back to a Backlog Gamers game review.
Third
Halo
one.
Titan, I know, for the third one for one of our Game of the Months.
Yes.
So this is really cool, or Games of the Month, whatever, however plural works. And here we are doing our third one, which is actually Lost in Random.
Yeah.
And boy, I tell you what, I have a lot of notes on this one.
Yep, me too.
A lot more compared to our previous games. For those that haven't been following along, you could check out some of those reviews that we've already done and check out some of the games that we've played already this year with our community, Backlog Gamer community. We've done Alan Wake and Life is Strange, True Colors. Which both of which we rated pretty highly. So we've been on a good streak so far this year, and here we are doing Lost in Random.
Random, and I'm trying to remember what we scored those other ones. I think we wound up giving Alan Wake an 8, and I want to say a 7.
True Colors was a 7. Yeah. So it's been a good year for our games of the month.
Yes.
And I'm really excited to dive into this one because we did finish this one just recently, and both of us have a ton of notes. So
More notes than I've taken for any game. By the way, let us know if you like our new setup here. It's going to be, I just realized it's going to be kind of interesting to put, I only streamed very little of this one because the people watching weren't really that interested in it. And, to be fair, I wasn't too interested in it, but it's going to be interesting because the videos we take, I might have to do a different way of recording because we're going to be both of us are going to be on screen for this next one, and we're going to be sitting in the same spots we're sitting now.
Right. So
I
that
just
should be
realized
really kind of interesting how that works out. But
it's going to be interesting. I might have to try to record separately or something. So
Well, but in this video, we're talking about Lost in Random.
Yes.
So I'm really excited to dive in here.
Let's do it.
How about we do just a couple of initial like overview, just give me initial first reactions.
Immediately, this game I could tell was not made for people like me. It was not made for me. I felt like this game was like a Tim Burton movie, for kids.
Right.
Is kind of how I felt. And I although I do like some of Tim Burton's stuff, I just wasn't really vibing with it at all. And so my first impression, I started the game and I didn't touch it for 2 weeks. And then I decided I'm just going to play this offline and spare my audience. And so I initially, and I had only completed the first act, really, one burg or one town or whatever it's called. Of Onecroft.
Thank you. Yeah, yes. I was like, wait a minute, I know it. I'm with you on that. I totally agree because my first impression obviously was in the trailer, and actually in the trailer it did make it did make the game look very cinematic, very Tim Burton-y. Just very inspired by Tim Burton, we should say, just with art style and concepts and the weirdness factor. And so it did make it look very interesting, the trailer did. But then I got into the game, and I think I immediately noticed the same thing, that the target audience was definitely younger. For this game than we are. And so we're a couple guys in our 30s here at this point, and at this point it didn't seem like we were the target audience for this, which means that we have to approach this review in a very different way than we have for the last couple of games that we did.
Which is why our notes are so extensive, because I was trying to be as objective as possible and looking at things in an objective way. But all reviews are subjective at some point. So, I mean, even though it may not be for us, targeted for us even, I still tried to give it a fair review, and we'll see if people agree with what I ended up on.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll have to see how that ended up. Okay, so let's jump into a little bit of concept here on this game, because the game centers around a young girl named Even, and her sister is stolen, Odd, and she is stolen by the queen because she rolled a 6 on her 12th birthday. And she's immediately taken away from Onecroft and taken to Sixtopia, I believe it was.
Yep.
Sixtopia, yeah. And she's taken to Sixtopia and just gone. So Even spends another year back in Onecroft having bad dreams, thinking about her sister and what could she possibly do. Finally, Even says, okay, it's time. I got to go get my sister. So basically, the gist of the game is that
she's woken up by that ghost, and she starts following the ghost.
Right. And she finally decides, okay, it's time to go, and I'm going to follow this ghost, who she thinks is possibly her sister sending a message somehow. And she's like, okay, I gotta go get my sister. So now you play as Even, running through the different towns. Onecroft and Two Town and Freedom. That's right. Forburg, 5
Tropolis, I think.
Tropolis, correct. And then Sixtopia. So you're basically running through all these different cities. Of course, a dice has 6 sides, and so lost and random. So there's supposed to be this element of chance for this whole game in the underlying story, right?
Yeah.
And you team up with a dice, which is aptly named Dicey, and very originally.
It's like naming your dog Doggy.
Exactly right. And if that doesn't tell you maybe the target audience for this, I don't know how we can explain it better. But then, okay, so this is the premise here. She's going to become a dice master to wield the dice and go and save her sister.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about the premise. How did you vibe with the premise, or did you enjoy the premise at all, or did you find it interesting? What?
It was another damsel in distress kind of premise to me. I feel like I've seen it before, especially in like kids movies. Where someone's taken away and then the other one goes on this huge adventure to save them and bring them home.
Right, especially a sibling, right?
Right, which I don't think is a bad premise to have. I mean, it does set up your story. I feel like as far as like, say, the hero's journey, I feel like there's no refusal to the call, right?
Yeah, sure.
She's not going to want to refuse to go find her sister. In fact, the first chance she really gets to go save her sister, I don't think she even argues it. She's like, I'm down. Let's go. Just immediately starts following a ghost, which I wouldn't follow a ghost anywhere. So I feel like, I feel like the premise works for the game.
Sure.
But for me in my 30s and knowing that this game wasn't targeted for me,
right,
I had a hard time. It couldn't sink its claws into me. I was just like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, you weren't ultimately invested. You weren't really like heart invested. Yeah.
No, I'm like, look at Onecroft. It's a crap hole, man. Maybe Sixtopia is a better place.
Yeah, maybe it is.
Who am I to judge?
Which we found out about that later. So
we did. And we should say, we didn't say it at the beginning, there will be spoilers.
There will be, there are definitely spoilers in this game. So, or in this review. So just expect it.
Yep.
So one of the things I wanted us to talk about is the atmosphere and some of the interactions. Because I felt like this game it was a very specific atmosphere, very thought out and designed. Okay. Yep. and there were so many characters. I mean, we interacted with people in every city. Talk to me a little bit about that.
We're doing atmosphere, you said, and
atmosphere
interactions.
And interactions, yeah.
Atmosphere, definitely dark, which was done on purpose. It's a dark world. I mean, it's run by a dictator, and the towns kind of reflect. I mean, it looked like everybody from every town was living poorly.
Yeah.
Except for maybe in Sextopia, where, I mean, seemed to be the only kind of nice looking place.
Right.
So I thought
it seemed like everybody wanted to be a Sixer. No matter what town you were in, everybody wanted to be a Sixer.
And whether or not they understood what was going on there.
Right.
But the interactions, most of the interactions I would say were interesting. They definitely had a wide variety of characters.
Oh, agreed.
That were different. Some of them
agreed.
spoke different languages, but we could somehow understand them, and they could understand us.
Right. Yeah.
And there were a couple characters I really did like. I'm trying to think here,
and I'll get to specific characters in just a minute.
Okay, so you don't want me to name characters. So I think as far as the interactions go, then I feel like some of them were drawn out. Especially ones that didn't speak the same language. They would just be the sentence would be like, "Oh, I'm working up here because they made me." But it drags on for like 30 seconds of him saying
forever.
That. Yeah, and I'm like, bro, like it wore me out talking to people. And you know how I play? I talked to everyone. I don't know if you talked to everyone. I talked to so many, everyone, most everybody until I was like, no, I'm done talking to you people. I can't do it anymore. I found that so there's a couple of things that I found interesting in the atmosphere and the engaging and some of the interaction that you have with some of the characters. So, and I'm talking about some of the lesser characters, like not main characters, right? Yeah.
So I found it very fascinating in this game that for such a cinematic game, one with such a cinematic flair and style and intention, I found it interesting that when you talk to people, their mouths didn't actually sync up with their talk, with their actual speaking, with the voice actors.
Yep.
And I'm sure that was a choice that they made, but it struck me as odd because the game is so cinematic in nature that I felt like, well, why wouldn't you have just gone the extra, couple feet?
Yeah.
You're already there.
Yeah.
With all the cinematic things, why wouldn't you go the next couple of feet to sync that up? And so I thought that was a little bit strange. And that kind of struck me as odd.
Yeah.
The atmospheres I thought were relatively interesting, but what I'll say is that I really didn't see a big difference between one Croft and say 5 Tropolis. I saw a very distinct difference in.
Well, I think 5 Tropolis was very clearly different because it was inside like a factory, whereas One Town actually had outdoor elements more so than 5 Tropolis did.
But the colors and the scheme, everything was kind of the same.
It's very drab.
Very drab, and I felt like, okay, you're supposed to be getting You're supposed to be getting better. Like each town is supposed to be getting more affluent, right?
Yes.
Or at least that's their perception. But really, at the end of the day, One Croft looked pretty much the same in poverty as
exactly. That's what I meant at the beginning when I said they all looked like they were living poorly. No matter which city you went to, they all seemed equally unpopulated. And drab everywhere you went. It was just, it was like, man, it's like this entire world is just draped in melancholy.
Right.
And it was just dark. And I think that's just kind of like the Tim Burton vibe, though, because Tim Burton's movies seem like that. They're dark colors, everywhere.
Yeah. So with that, it seemed like nobody really, even the characters that you interacted with, even these like random side characters, they didn't seem much different
right?
Like from town to town.
And some of them were the exact same character models.
Correct. And so that's another thing I wanted to point out is some of the interactions. Okay. I wanted to point out the fact that some of the voice acting was horrible.
Yes.
Some of the voice acting was actually great.
Yes.
And what I noticed was any random side character that you ran into, for the most part, was horrible.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But most of the like main interactions with the main characters that you interact with were great.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And there was a stark contrast between the two.
Yes.
So it wasn't like, oh, okay, no, those are main characters, so they're a little bit better. No, there's like a distinct difference.
Yes.
In the quality of voice acting between the two tiers,
well, especially with the smaller characters who didn't even have side quests for you. You could talk to them and they'd say stuff to you. You could have a short conversation with them, but they didn't matter at all to anything.
Right. And I don't know, obviously those were choices made for world building or just making the world feel more alive. But then when they did that and the voice acting for those characters was not as good, it actually kind of took me out of it. And I was like, well, that's not great. Yeah. That's not the best. Now, I actually liked quite a bit of this game. And so I don't want people to think that this was just like, this is going to be a dump on Lost in Random, because I actually did like quite a bit of this game. And speaking of that, let's talk about some of the characters that we enjoyed engaging, because there were several characters that were rather fun to engage in. Who were some of those for you?
So I liked Seymour a lot.
Yeah, he was fun.
Seymour was a fun character. He was cheery. He was like the opposite. He didn't seem like he lived in the environment that he was living in.
Yeah, he was like making the best of it, man.
Yeah, he was missing two of his three eyes. And I mean, he was unique in his own right. I don't think I saw another character in the game that looked even remotely like Seymour, even though there were a couple of different interesting builds. Manny Dex, who... pardon myself here. Every time he said his name, it sounded like he was saying many, which I thought was funny because I'd laugh every time he said his own name. It was just his accents. It was Manny Dex. And I enjoyed him just because
I enjoyed him as well,
because the different areas he went to, and he wound up being there in multiple different locations. Like there was more than one of him. He was,
and then he'd talk to you about it. Yeah, and
but you could talk to him.
I don't know how I got here.
Yeah, you could talk to him about being in these different locations. Yeah. The narrator was probably my favorite.
Okay, so I want to say the narrator was brilliant.
Brilliant.
The narrator
my favorite part
was
of the game, really.
Probably my favorite part of the game. I totally agree.
Absolutely.
He was absolutely brilliant. And I love the interaction that the narrator had with the game as it went on, as it progressed.
He broke the fourth wall.
Yes, he broke the fourth wall
so much, and it was great. I loved that.
Beautifully crafted, honestly. Yes. I thought the narrator, whoever was in charge of writing the narrator's pieces, and then obviously the narrator himself, the voice actor, just absolutely brilliant.
And the fact when he gets kidnapped,
by
the queen.
Yeah.
And then
all
she starts narrating.
Yeah, and you're like, what is happening?
And she's actually having an impact on the mood of the character.
Right.
I was like, okay. I was like, man,
this is cool.
Interesting. I'm digging that.
Yeah. And honestly, I thought it could have been really interesting to incorporate that a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
And then make it so that we had some issues with the queen a little bit earlier in the game, but now finally we get the narrator back earlier as well, and so now we have even greater interaction with the narrator for even more of the game, which I would have been all about, because I thought he was fantastic.
That was one of the most interesting parts of the game for me as well, and then of course finding him and freeing him, and she's. Like it is very meta, where she's like talking to the guy that's narrating her story.
Yeah.
And he's narrating her story from that point on, and she can hear him still. Narrating her story. So their interaction near the end was just, I loved it. It was great.
It was brilliant.
And some of his reactions to things that were happening, like he was almost talking to us instead of narrating. It's like, oh, whoa. I didn't think that was going to happen.
Like, whoa, did you guys see that? Like, yeah, it was pretty great. Yeah. I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed the narrator.
Any other characters that you really enjoyed?
The one, I can't remember his name. He's the boss fight in the second town, two-town.
Yes.
You remember his name?
Rojam.
He was fun because he was rhyming. Like he kept, but he was like the opposite of the mayor. And they had this whole upside down where it was the same town, but it was in the upside down. It was all different and weird. And he was still like forming himself. He was still trying to become whole.
Royam.
Yeah. And, and he would try to rhyme, but he would get things, he wouldn't rhyme. It reminded me a lot of, Parks and Rec. Who's that goofy dude that's friends with Tom?
John Ralphio.
He's the worst. He's the worst. Yeah. When it was that scene in the nightclub when they were doing all the drinking the snake juice, and he kept like making up rhymes for people. He's like,
they were terrible.
But he would say the rhyme, but then he would like end it, and he's like, you're just as cool as Big Ben clock. He didn't have to say clock, and Tom kept saying, stop saying clock. That's kind of what Royam reminded me of, because he could.
Yeah.
He would say the thing that he wanted to say, but he said it in a different way that didn't rhyme. And then, of course, our character, we have you got to choose your dialogue options, and I would always choose ones that finished the rhyme, and it ticked him off every time. He was like,
yeah. Oh, why'd you do that? It reminded me of Captain Holt from Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yeah, I'm a poet. I didn't even know I was rhyming those words.
Exactly. Oh man, crack me up.
Yes.
No, I totally agree. I thought the interaction with Royam was awesome.
Yes.
I really enjoyed that part too as well.
Yep.
And actually, that brings us to a very interesting thing, because one of the things that makes games so great is game mechanics.
Yes.
And unique game mechanics often can luster over a lot of other shortcomings, right?
Right.
And one I want to go to what I really loved about it. I really loved the fight against Royam.
Yes.
I actually thought it was a great boss battle. It was different. It was fun. It was wild.
Yep.
However,
that's the only time it's really like that.
That was the only time it was really like that.
Yep.
And so all the rest of the boss battles were not like that. And I was like, what happened there? This was great.
Yep.
That boss battle was great.
I couldn't agree more with that. You have to beat him. You're not just, killing him and taking his health down and stuff. There were also breaks in the fight where he would try to beat you in a rhyme battle.
Yeah.
And you had to, come up with the rhyme. It would have been cooler if there was a time limit for you and a bunch of different options to select that you had to read really quickly and find the right thing.
But then he had the swiping motions and other things that the other best boss battles really didn't have.
Well, yeah, he felt like the only actual boss battle in the fight.
Right.
And I was thinking after that fight, I was thinking, that'd be cool if Threedom and Forberg and Five Tropolis, they all had boss fights.
A sweet boss fight that we could.
They didn't. Experience. The only other unique boss fight in that was the fake queen.
Yes.
Where she could move when you rolled your dice,
doing your cards.
You were frozen, and time froze, and you had to pick which cards you wanted to use.
Yeah, that definitely surprised me.
And she could still move. She hit. I didn't even know she could move. She came up and hit me. No. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that could happen.
Hey, you could. Yeah. Hey, she could move.
Yeah.
That was great. I thought that was a great moment too, because that was whoa, hey, this game's throwing something at me I didn't expect. That's okay. I'm in.
Creeped me out a little bit because I mean, it happened so late in the game. I was so used to my fights going a certain way, And so now then you at that point, and you had to fight her like 3 or 4 times through that chapter, and which was annoying. It's like, okay, I mean, you're just recycling this. It was kind of like the werewolf bosses in the Order 1886.
Sure.
And so that got annoying, but but she was the only other unique boss type character you could fight, and I was kind of disappointed with the lack of boss fights compared to what they introduced you relatively early in the game. Versus the rest.
So me, and I enjoy, generally speaking, I enjoy there to not be so much skill tree, so many different combinations that it's hard for me to keep track. I generally like it a little simpler so that I don't have to learn this great manual of things to understand the battling system and how I need to upgrade my character and go crazy.
Right.
However, I found that this game would have benefited from a little more complexion with the card system. I thought some of the cards were really interesting.
Yeah.
However, I also found that some of them didn't even matter. They were like worthless.
Yep.
And I also, so one of the things that I noticed is I got into a rhythm of fighting and crushing dudes and I was like, I don't even need to use any other cards. I'll just keep using these cards. And so I think it could have been really cool to have where you could have a couple of different decks, because you can only have one deck.
Yeah.
And you can only have a 16 card limit. And I thought that was great. You should have a limit. But I thought that it would be cool to have a couple of different types of decks.
Yes.
That had different abilities, different things. And you can't use this kind of card in this type of deck or whatever. And you had to actually choose which deck you wanted to use before different battles. And I thought that would have made it way more interesting. I thought it was just a little too simple.
Yes. I agree with that. And just for clarity, for those who have not played this game, the combat system, essentially, you don't have any weapons or anything. You just have the dice.
Right.
And you have to shoot the crystals off the bad guys. And if you collect enough crystals, you can
slingshot,
roll the dice, and then you can select from the cards that you have in your active deck.
And they'll give you a power.
You can get a weapon, depending on what the number you rolled is. And there's cheats where you can add an extra number to that roll. You could get health from it. You could get bombs.
Yeah, or draw extra cards or make cards cost less.
Yes. Right. And so I feel like
strategically, what I ended up doing was taking the ones that give you bonus points.
Yes.
I added all of those to my deck.
Same.
And then I took all the cards where it made the cost go down.
Yes, I did that too.
And I threw all of those cards in.
And to ensure that I got those cards more often, I also put in the one that for the chess mode they have.
Where you draw more cards.
Where you can draw another card.
Exactly. Okay, so interesting. You and I haven't discussed the strategy on this.
No, we haven't discussed this game
whatsoever.
At all.
This right here proves my point exactly, because what happened was you and I ended up playing the exact same cards.
Same strategy.
Same strategy. And what? You threw in a bunch of bombs?
I had bombs, and I had that
one
ghost
of each
thing.
Weapon?
I had the ghost thing. No, and I didn't have one of each weapon. I only did the hammer. Because the hammer, hands down, was the best. I would just demolish people with that. I didn't even.
Yeah, the hammer was the best.
Honestly,
if I could get the hammer, I grabbed it.
Yeah, every time. I would grab the hammer every time. If I didn't have enough points to spend on the hammer, I would pin it, wait till I had another chance to roll.
Exactly. Right. And you can pin cards so that they show up and the next time you get to roll.
They're guaranteed.
And so it sounds to me like we played a very similar strategy in battles. Why? Because that was the best strategy to just absolutely crush and demolish the enemies, which made it to the point where I felt like it was interesting. The battle system was interesting, but it got boring for me later.
It got very boring for me early on, because once I started getting into a rhythm and not really flirting around with any other cards, and I wanted to say earlier, based on how the game was, played. Yes, the combat's unique, but it was slow. It was really slow.
Yes,
you throw the dice, then you're sitting there picking. So the card usage time was it was not much. You have 15 cards in your deck, but you could literally draw them every time. I think the combat would have been more interesting if, yes, we have different deck selections because different characters that you're fighting are diverse enough that you need certain cards for them to help you in combat versus different characters. Or maybe if you have 15 cards you can choose from, you need to play them diplomatically. Because once you play them, they don't come back for the rest of the fight.
Then they don't come back, and then that was your chance.
And so I feel like that wasn't utilized.
There were some other elements. There were some other elements there that they could have utilized to make it a little more complex, and it would have been better for us.
Yes.
Now and here's where we got to be fair, because it does seem like that would, if it did that, it might have taken it out of target audience.
True.
Range.
True. That's true.
Because if they did complicate it a little more like that, then it might have taken it out of the target area, which is obviously younger than us.
And us having played more complex games with fighting, like The Witcher. I mean, I was all about putting on the right oils and making sure I drank the right potions and prepared for combat based on the enemy I was fighting. So, I mean, a more complex fighting system would have kept me from getting bored more than I did. And honestly, every time I got into a fight, by the time I finished it, I was just like, okay, let's do this again.
Okay, here we go again. Yeah. One of the things that they did have in there that I thought was kind of fun the first time or the second time was the board games, when you got stuck in a board game and the piece was moving around the board while you were fighting.
Yeah.
And I thought that was cool. Okay. But again, I felt like it was oversimplified, and it could have been a lot more interesting with different elements that were added to it.
And they had chess pieces. It was a chess piece that was moving. It would have been cool if it was more like a chess match, like a real game of chess or something. But it was their own unique take on it, and it was at the very least they were all different, and that made it a little more interesting at the very least.
Yeah. Let's get into some quirks. Okay, let's get into some quirks in this game.
I have many.
I have a lot in this zone. Let's talk about some quirks about this game.
And I'll try not to go off on all of them, but I do want to list all of them.
Yeah. So let's start with some character quirks real quick, because we have talked a little bit about characters already. So let's talk about some quirks surrounding characters. My first one here is the Count in Threeburg was absolutely awful. Just absolutely, just awful. It was horrendous. It hurt to talk to him. It was awful.
Which one was he?
Then he was the little skinny one, afraid of being assassinated.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, it was awful.
He was miserable to talk to.
He was miserable to talk to. Second, though, the Duke, his brother, was worse.
Yes.
Like, it was so just as worse.
And
the sister was the only one that I was like, oh, yeah, okay.
Well, she probably would have won that war had we not intervened, honestly.
Oh,
those other two were just completely useless. And I hated having to go learn the proper way to address the Duke. Your Excellence.
Oh my gosh,
I'm just like,
that was horrifying.
I did not like that mission. It was easy to complete because all the people you needed to learn from were literally right there in the same area.
Yeah.
But you had to. It was done so that you select the correct dialogue options, and if you select the wrong one, even on accident, I'll get out of here. You can't talk to me like that because I'm the Duke, and I'm just like, ugh, what century is this? Like, make up your mind.
This is horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are some bad quirks. Now, I don't actually think all quirks are bad, because I had a couple of quirks.
That's why he calls them quirks and not complaints.
Yeah.
Although my quirks are all complaints.
Because I actually had a couple of quirks that I thought were actually really kind of fun. So the warrior guys in Threedom, do you remember them? War.
Yes.
War.
Yes.
Okay. I thought those guys were hilarious.
Yes.
I actually thought they were a whole lot of fun to interact with.
I did play along with what they were doing.
And I totally played along with what they were doing. So those characters were a blast to actually interact with.
Yes.
And one guy is trying to teach you to, harness your aggression and your inner warrior and your inner voice to just war, really go crazy. And then the other guy's like, let's find our zen, because if we our inner peace, We know we can battle well.
Yes.
And so, I mean, it was just those two guys, quirky as anything,
Yeah.
but actually a good quirk. I really enjoyed them.
Yeah,
I thought they were...
those were definitely a couple of interesting characters. I want to say, this when you had mentioned character quirks, is the main character. More often than not, you only had 2 dialogue options.
Sure, yeah.
Which is fine. But I guess being used to playing games like Mass Effect, you're used to 3. There's kind of a Paragon and a Renegade option, and then something kind of in between. This character had a nice, proper, response, being, well-mannered.
Yeah.
And the other one was just complete.
Yeah.
I mean, a complete jerk. And I was like, it's like you're hot or you're cold. You are nothing in between.
Yeah. I mean, kids can be that way sometimes.
Sure.
I totally get it. But I agree. There was a couple of times where I was like, oh, I'm not going to say that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that either.
Well, I mean, she would, fire off immediately. Even if someone was just slightly rude, but they were still nice. She's like, I'm not going to talk to you. You talk to me like that, you're a jerk. Yeah, I'm like, whoa.
Yes. Yeah, that was a weird quirk. I got another one for you. Okay, actually, this is kind of a... you know what? I'm going to save that one for... graphics. And do you have another character quirks that you need to mention before we move on to graphics?
I'm not seeing any other character quirks here.
Okay.
I do have some. I have quite a few gameplay mechanic quirks.
Yeah.
Is that a section that you have for us?
Yeah, we kind of talked about combat, but we can get into... Why don't we talk about the rest of the gameplay?
Yeah, because I felt I hated controlling the camera
so much. It was awful.
It was so bad, especially in areas where the camera would sometimes fight me. I'm trying to look around for crystals, but the camera wanted to make sure I was facing this way. So I'm like trying to hold the stick left, but it's like forcing me right, and I was just like, why?
That was like the first note I put down is sometimes while running around, it won't let you look around.
Yes.
And that drove me absolutely bonkers.
Yeah.
It forced the perspective, which it happens in games all the time, of course. But usually it's a cinematic moment where you can't move or like you can't do... Like you can't... It's like a cinematic moment. It's a cutscene. And it forces your perspective.
Yes.
Like it actually forces... It stops. It slows everything down. This game, man, it drove me freaking crazy. I'm trying to run through a door, and then I'm like trying to look for these little things that I got to shoot to get more crystals.
Right. And even in combat, I would have... it was so clunky. I would start getting nauseous sometimes playing it because I'm like trying to look and see where the enemies are while I'm running away.
Yes.
And
it would force you to look somewhere else.
Yeah, it was like, you need to pay attention to where you're running this way, because I was just like, I can't. The camera.
It didn't happen. Yeah. I wouldn't say like 90% of the game it doesn't do that, but probably 10%. It was enough to be noticeable that it like really bothered me.
Yeah, 10% even. The game took me 18 hours to beat, and 10%'s a lot. Even
that's a lot. I did not care for that. And what else do you have on game mechanics other than that? Because I got a couple others as well.
I have quite a few here. The next one I have here is it's annoying to have to press A to jump off of every single ledge instead of just being able to just walk and jump down.
Yeah,
and maybe that's something that's not a big deal, but for me, I walk up to an edge and I get stuck there. I'm like, I gotta press A like every time.
You know what I saw that is? What I saw that as was it's you're moving on past this section. Are you sure? Like, do you need to go back and check on it?
I could understand that if they only did that at those sections, but there were places that you could jump down from that you could easily walk around and get back up to if you wanted.
Oh my gosh, hang on, I gotta pause you there. The ladders. Climbing ladders in this game is miserable,
especially with the camera.
So tall.
Yes,
they are so tall, and you
so did you
slow.
Did you know you could she would climb faster if you press the sprint button? Oh, I don't know if you tried that. It would go faster.
She was so slow. It drove me crazy.
Here's another one for you. when you're shopping for cards, there's like 34 different cards in the game.
Yes.
The shop would often sell numerous cards of the same kind.
Right.
But it never told me what cards I already owned. And it drove me nuts because I'm like, well, do I have this card? I don't know. So I kept having to back out, go look at my inventory. Okay, no, I don't have that. And go back in and find it. And then you see another card.
Yeah.
I was trying to get one of every card at least so that I could test them all out.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it was taking, I feel like that's one of those mechanics in games that's like, it's nice to have that in the game because it makes my life a little easier. It respects my time more because it takes me time to keep backing out, opening up my inventory, and then backing out of that, opening up the shop. And so that was kind of an unpleasant experience for me.
Yeah. Let me mention one for me that is one of my least favorite things in games. In games in general, period, end of story. One of my least favorite things in games is when the game forces your character to move slow.
Yes.
It's one of my least favorite things because I'm used to moving. I'm used to going. Let's go. But then the game forces you to walk slow for dialogue purposes or whatever.
We're looking at you, Gears of War, because that was a staple. That game.
Crazy.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely bonkers. In this game, okay, it didn't do it a whole bunch, but when it did do it, it was forever.
Yes.
It took forever for me to be able to move again.
Getting into Forberg was kind of like that in some places.
Man.
Like the start of Forberg when you fall out of the blimp or the spider or whatever.
That part, that drives me crazy.
Yeah.
That drives me crazy. Any other ones on that list?
These are just gameplay related.
Yeah.
Well, some side quests I did. I would do what was required for it.
Yeah.
But it didn't register that it was completed. And so I thought I was doing something wrong. So like, for example, in Two Town, when you had to get a special word from this lady that sold words.
Right.
I got the word first time, and then I ran to the dude that wanted that I could trade the word for something else to get complete the side quest. But I didn't have the word. I went back and I did every option that she had, thinking there was a different word. Finally, I just did the same word again and got the word again, and then it registered and let me move on. And I'm like, I just did all that, and that happened to me a few times on side quests specifically.
Yeah, interesting. I didn't actually experience that. On side quests, so it could have just been a glitch for you, which is terrible. But what are you gonna do?
I have one about the final boss, but if you have a section for that later, we can do it. And then I only have one more complaint, which was when you look at your map, it never showed me where I was at on the map.
Where you are on the map. That was probably one of the worst maps in games I've ever seen in my life.
It would highlight the section you're in. The title of the thing was kind of in the general area,
but doesn't actually tell you where you are.
Yes.
And it's like,
and I'm like, I don't know. Okay, I'm on this street, so then I have to go out of the map, go look at the street signs, or try to
run around and try and get
things
into
that were familiar
section.
and drawn on the map.
It was whack.
Oh,
yeah. The map was not good. I agree, 100%. You know what? I'm laughing over here thinking about a couple of these things that we missed and when it came to characters. And if you guys play this game, you'll understand that there is a lot of character interaction in this game.
Yes.
And so there's so much of the game is interacting with different characters. And so you have to forgive us if we're going back to characters over and over again, because there's so many different times that you interact with characters in this. One of the really interesting, weird moments, was death.
Yeah.
On the boat. When you're on the boat and death is like ferrying you.
He was an interesting character.
I was like, what is happening right now? It took me so off guard. He starts speaking to you and just is like so not like remotely like any other characters that you've met in the game so far.
Yeah.
and his vibe is so not like, it's so not grim and dark like the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And you're like, but this is the Grim Reaper. Like,
yes.
I'm so confused.
Which
so,
I thought was, it made me laugh when that happened.
It did. It made me laugh.
I was like, okay.
So I actually thought he was going to burst out into song the way he was talking. And I was like, I'm so confused.
Yes.
What's happening here?
There's a lot of energy behind what he had to say to you. And you got an achievement for it, for getting a pep talk from death.
Yeah. And I say that because, and I went back to that one because I think because this kind of comes into the gameplay aspect as well, because this next one here is another character, but this character is very much tied to the gameplay mechanics. So when you get to remember when you're making your dream card?
Yes.
Okay. We go in, we talk to the visionary.
Yes.
Which is probably one of the most grotesque and horrifying things I've ever seen in my life.
Yes.
And I thought to myself,
you look like a fetus.
What is the target audience for this game? Because I was like, this is horrifying. And it was like a fetus potato.
Yes.
A potato fetus.
Yes.
And it was horrifying.
Yes.
But I bring him up because that whole town, Five Tropolis.
Yes.
They were the card makers, and you had to go about and make cards. When you were doing making the dream card, how did you enjoy that experience? Because personally, that was one of the more engaging sections of the game for me.
Yes, that Five Tropolis was probably one of my favorite areas because one, it was straightforward. You're traveling to different areas. You're just going, right?
You're just going.
You're just going, and you're going forward. And the mission itself, you're watching. The visionary has a vision for what your card should be, and then you have to go to the painter so that they can paint your card, and then you have to go to the guy who's going to glue, the image onto your card.
Yeah,
and then of course the final guy who. Brought it to. I had to made the rules.
The game master,
the rules master, the rule maker or whatever. Nice. And then of course you had to go up to the mountain so they could all finalize it together.
Yeah.
Make it come true. I thought that was one of the more interesting and engaging experiences in the whole game. It's a shame it took us all the way to Five Tropolis, which for me was probably 12 plus hours by the time I got there to be like, okay, this is interesting.
Okay. Yeah, this is cool. Yeah. This is fun. Yeah. So I think that in the gameplay aspect of that was that it was more straightforward.
Yes.
And it wasn't running around all over the place trying to find memories or trying to find these other things. And it actually felt like, okay, we're progressing now.
Yes.
And we're actually going to get somewhere. And at this point, it's like, okay, I'm finally going to have a special card that I get to use. But
not really.
Not really.
You don't even get to use it once. It's automatically used.
You don't even get to use it.
In a cutscene because the card was basically your ticket to Sixtopia.
To get to Sixtopia. And that was so disappointing.
Yes.
Because I had been using the same cards.
Did you really need a visionary for that?
Yeah, I was using the same cards over and over and over, and I was so excited to get this new card that I thought was actually going to be cool. And then I didn't get to use it.
That was a major disappointment.
Such a bummer, dude.
Yes.
That was such a bummer. And I think that was difficult to stomach because I was like, man, come on, guys. Like I was running through this and I was like excited that you guys were finally going to give me something special to actually work with. And then I don't get to use it.
Yep. That was just the build up to that, just to be let down by that. Yeah. I honestly is kind of, in a nutshell, my experience with this game.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, I have two sections here
because
I want to get to some of that wrap up stuff because I know there's some good stuff in there.
Yes.
But I want to touch two areas that we haven't touched yet, but are areas that were really big for us in previous games that we've reviewed. Okay. One is graphics and two is score. But I think both of those are going to get wrapped up pretty quickly in this video for us. So talk to me about graphics.
I didn't think they were good at all. I thought the art style was interesting. At the very least, it was unique in its own way. If not a little Tim Burton-esque, especially with the character designs and the way they looked. But overall, I mean, it's one of the reasons I didn't even want to play the game when we watched the trailer. I'm like, it doesn't look good. And of course, you can't really judge a game based on the graphics just because the original Max Payne looks terrible, but it's an amazing game.
Sure.
But so
it is a part of gaming.
It is.
I agree with you.
Nothing stood out to me though for graphics in a positive way.
Some of the graphics were interesting, and I thought some of the art style was the attempt. I get it. They went for a Tim Burton kind of feel. I get it. But even Cake Mama came in while I was playing the game, and she said, what is this? Some sort of Tim Burton game? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, it's ugly. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, but that's kind of how, Tim Burton kind of does his thing. And she was like, no, but it's like even ugly. It's like ugly. And I was like,
yes, even his stuff.
Yeah, you're not wrong. It doesn't look great. It looks pretty bad.
Yeah, I would agree I think ugly is a good way to describe that game. Yeah, it is definitely.
It felt dirty. Like everything felt dirty in the game. And maybe that was an aesthetic choice, but I just felt like, man, you could have given us a little more vibrance in a lot of areas, and that probably would have helped. And clean some of the things up, right?
Yes.
Clean it, whatever. The other thing about the game graphics, and this is the one that got me, was some of the models look like trash Muppets.
Yes.
Okay. Some of the models look like trash Muppets. Like you straight pulled a Muppet out of a dumpster that was burning, and they look awful. And I was like, not just that, but I thought more than once, which, by the way, if I think this more than once while playing a game, then it's probably not a good thing.
Yes.
I thought more than once that half of the characters look like Jabba the Hutt.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. Yes.
And he's the ugliest Muppet.
Especially that Oracle lady that you have to talk to find.
Horrible. Yeah. And the frog-looking Jabba the Hutt Oracle, it was awful.
Yes.
Some of the models were terrible.
Yes.
It just was not good. Not good.
I could not agree more. The graphics did not impress me. Like nothing even stood out graphics wise that I thought, oh, okay, this looks good. The environments were drab. The characters were, you're right. Yeah. They looked dirty. Nothing impressed me as far as graphics go. Like not one thing. And maybe that's what they were going for. And as I've stated a couple times in this review, the game, obviously, I'm not the target audience for this game.
We're obviously not the target audience.
Maybe you like that. The game has rated well with other people.
Sure.
But, they're not us. This is our subjective opinion. So, I got to say graphics were not a strong point for me at all.
So, and then let's talk about the score real quick. And I don't really think we need a lot of time on the score because, frankly, there was...
It was all the same, really.
I was disappointed because I felt like there were moments where the score could have been like epic. Like you really could have launched us into an epic mode by giving us a score that was just like, yes, take the hero and run. But for the most part, the score was kind of the same, and it sounded almost like a Muppet track or like a Fraggle Rock track or something like that. And it just...
Don't be knocking Fraggle Rock, bro.
No.
Down a Fraggle Rock.
No.
Down a Fraggle Rock.
I'm not. But what I'm saying is it was goofy, but like with a mix of eerie, and it was like not great.
I just don't think it had much different. Yeah, I didn't really notice the music as much, and it wasn't really different. I guess, and maybe I wasn't paying enough attention. The music didn't stand out to me at all because it was all just kind of the same. It blended in with everything else.
Yeah, I listened and you know me, I listened
Yes.
specifically for the score and because I love scores, but I was like, man, this is not this doesn't get me excited.
Yeah.
This one's not going on my playlist.
And
like,
sometimes
you know what I mean?
the score could really set the mood for where you're at.
Correct.
Take a look at Unravel. The music in
Yes.
that game was
Come on.
absolutely beautiful. And
Ori
it
and the Blind
really
Forest.
set the tone. It set the pace for
Totally
that
agree.
game. Whereas this game, I felt the pacing was very slow, and I believe the music
Very
matched that.
slow.
The pacing was
Yeah.
slow, combat was slow, and the music was slow. And that
Yeah.
it just didn't stand out to me very well at all.
Yeah. Yeah. The slowness of the game is probably one of the biggest things. It just
Yes.
felt so slow. So I want to end on, before we go into scoring this game as a whole. I want to end on one thing that you loved, and then one thing that just killed it for you.
One thing that I love, let's see what I have left here, because I have a few things. I thought that each town was interesting, and they had, each town had its own unique stories that kind of related to the number of the town that it was in. I thought that was very interesting, whereas everyone in Two Town kind of had split personalities.
There was
a certain duality there, right?
Writing.
Yes.
There was some very interesting writing in this game.
Freedom, you had 3 siblings at war with each other that was impacting the entire area, because they were all the leaders of that area. Their father was killed, and I thought that was an interesting dynamic, although it didn't play out as well as I had hoped. So I enjoyed certain things like that, but if you want me to pick something that was my favorite, the narrator was honestly that guy kept me engaged. The best comic relief you could ask for in a game like this. That guy, he kept me engaged, and I was excited when he started talking, because I'm like, oh great, here's some color coming into this dark game.
Totally agree. And honestly, aside from that, one thing that this was a really special, it was just a special thing, I think, for me and other people like me, and I'll explain that in a second. But one of the, because I totally agree with you, the narrator was absolutely my favorite part.
Oh yeah, hands down.
There was a special thing that I really loved in this game, which was really cool. There was a game table. I'm trying to remember what town it was in. Was it Forberg, where there was 2 guys and they were fighting over who was cheating. And you had to interact with them and talk to them.
Yes.
And it was a dice game at a table and etc. Okay. So one of the guys right there, running the game table, his name was Quark, which is the same name as a Star Trek character from Deep Space Nine who runs Dabo tables, a gaming area. So it was a little nod, a clever nod that pretty much only Star Trek fans would see. But I, of course, as a huge Star Trek fan, I really appreciated it, and I was like, oh, that's great. You know what? In all of this craziness that I'm playing, okay, that's pretty cool. I love that. A little nod to some Star Trek there. I like that. So that was a special moment for me. But again, I totally agree. I love the narrator.
Hands down. And I guess I would say I do have one here that I was going to bring up earlier. That probably the least favorite thing in this game for me was that final boss fight. I whooped the sister pretty easily, but I was thinking the final boss fight is going to be the queen, right? We've been talking about how horrible and evil she is. She's the only other dice wielder in the game.
Yeah.
She didn't use her die once. I beat her in 2.5, 3 minutes.
Right.
I was like, I was like, that's it?
I had way more fun, fighting against Royam.
Yeah. Royam was the best fight in the game. The queen, this is the climax here. This should be the penultimate fight of the game. I should be, near death by the time I'm done with it. It was short. It wasn't fun. And the fight itself was just easy. Most of the time she just stood there, and her big swing that she would bring down to come at you was so noticeable that I had time to drive 10 semis past her before she swung. Yeah. And
maybe that's a problem for it being not us not being the target audience, right?
Yeah.
But I agree.
Huge
I
disappointment.
thought that was a huge disappointment. And honestly, we've already touched on my most disappointing thing, but the most disappointing thing for me was what was the fact that we built this, we worked together with all these people who were helping us to overthrow the queen, to give us a dream card, and then we didn't even get to use it, which was just garbage for me.
Never even got to hold it or put it in our collection.
Didn't even get to put it in our collection.
Yeah.
Didn't even get to put it in our deck. That just sucked, man, and that killed me. I actually have one notable mention before we go into scoring this game.
Okay.
Notable mention: the janitor in Sixtopia was absolutely hilarious.
Super funny. He was out of his mind. His beard was also the mop. It was so long and it like wrapped up around the pole
to the stick.
He was mopping with his beard, which was hilarious to me. We should have mentioned him during unique characters and stuff, but he was a treat.
Yeah, honorable mention. Yeah, so look, okay, let's break it down. Let's get to the end of it. This is it. Break down. Tell me your score, or just give me the overview with all of it, just compact, and then give me a score.
Okay. I do have to mention, because I did miss one thing here that was a negative, and it wasn't gameplay related. It was achievement related. I had an achievement. There was an achievement for completing all the puzzles in the game. I completed all the puzzles in the game, and it did not unlock. I had to replay, because there's no chapter select. You had to replay from the beginning. Although when you're just trying to get past stuff, it is so much quicker. I got there in a couple hours. Honestly, it didn't take me that long to get that far, which took me 16 hours to get to prior to that, you know. And it unlocked the second time. I was just like, if it doesn't unlock this time, I'm not going back for it.
Yeah, not doing that
Ridiculous.
Again,
that really was a huge detriment to me as someone who hunts achievements in games.
Sure.
One, the ability to not be able to have a chapter select in a more modern game, not good. I thought the score, it wasn't good for me. The graphics didn't stand out to me. The combat, you know, although unique and fun when you first started, really became a chore as you went on into the game. And you know, some of the story, the side quests were often pointless, and they didn't really need to do them. They didn't really add anything to the overall story. However, I will say it did have interesting characters that I enjoyed, like the janitor and Seymour. And so, who's that? The Hollow Man. We didn't even talk about him.
Yeah.
He was very interesting. I found the interactions with him to be interesting, especially since you see him in multiple different locations. And so those were fun. Chasing down and fighting Royam was really fun, and getting Seymour's eyes back and him popping his eyes back in his head. And he's like, he can see with 3 eyes now. Was very fun. Oh, the Shadow Man. That's what his name is. The Shadow Man.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So I think the story itself and maybe some of the side quests were probably one of the better parts of the game. The narrator really bumps the score up for me. My overall score for this, though, is a 5 out of 10.
Oh, very good. Interesting.
That's based on my experience and my just the bias I have for it, I guess.
And that's fair. And you know, so for me, I didn't have the glitching that you had. For me, it played perfectly well.
Well, I doubt you would have went back and got it anyway if it did glitch.
Yeah, I probably would have been like, no, forget that, bro. I'm not going back.
Like, that can't be the only one I miss.
Yeah, so actually, I did miss one. The only one I missed was going back and knocking on the door, which perfectly was at the very beginning.
Super easy to go back for that one.
And it was one that I actually ran up to the door, but never actually knocked on it, because he was like, the narrator said she didn't knock on the door. So
I had to get that one too.
Okay, I guess I'm not knocking on it.
I had to go back for that one too.
But so that was the only achievement I actually missed in a natural playthrough, going through it. So there are missable achievements, of course. But you know,
honestly,
if you
just play the game,
look at the achievements
and do everything,
and then just play it, for the most part, you should get it.
Oh yeah.
As for my score, here we go. I think there were things that you actually really enjoyed about the game. There were some interactions with some characters that were really actually a joy and fun and hilarious and goofy, and they were fun. They were fun moments in a very bleak game for the most part. And the narrator was fantastic. He really boosts my score as well, actually, because I think he was great.
Yes.
I felt like sometimes the combat was fun, sometimes it wasn't. So I'm kind of I got bored with it, really.
Yeah.
Over time. And honestly, after Royam, that was the best battle, and he was in Two Town, which is
at the beginning.
Yeah, and that's kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
I thought some of the interactions with some of the characters were awful. I thought some of the graphics, like we said, weren't great. The score was whatever. It was very measly. And honestly, I would have really enjoyed better interactions with Dicey.
Yeah.
I would have enjoyed more upgrading with Dicey. Like I said, I think there could have been a lot more upgrading that we could have done.
Or more sections that you had to play as Dicey to do stuff. You only had 2 sections the whole game like that.
The entire game. And then not only that, but the pacing of this game was so slow. So slow. And as a backlog gamer, I often feel like, hey, look, I have limited time for me to play a game. And this is going so slow that this is driving me crazy. So with all that being said, I loved a lot. There were a lot of things that were great and fun, but there were also a lot of things that were not great and not fun. And when it comes down to it, I also went with a 5.
Boom. We agreed this month. Nice.
I know. Our first month where we actually agree like 100%. Our first couple months we had to we moved one way or the other to find the right.
I think I gave Alan Wake a 9 and you gave it an 8, and I was like, you know what? The game made me sick while I was playing it. I'll drop it to an 8. That's fair.
Yeah. But this one, I think we could both agree. I was absolutely a 5 on this one. Yep. And so Lost in Random, I appreciated some of the character things that we got to enjoy in that. I really do. There was some fun stuff, but it looks like you're gonna get a 5 from the Backlog gamers. And
right
so
there.
For Backlog gamers, game of the year, you might not make it.
Yeah, if we did a top 5 best, top 5 worst, I think it might make one of those lists.
Yeah, you might not make it. Yeah, we'll see what list you make it on. I mean, we could get really unlucky and get a lot of bad games for the rest of the year, and you could make the top 5. Yep. But I imagine that you're gonna make the bottom 5, and that's because we're generally pretty positive people. But this one was tough.
Yep.
We enjoyed some things, so thank you for those things. But also, oof about the rest of
overall not impressed. So let us know what you guys think down in the comments. If you've played this, if you enjoyed it, let us know what you enjoyed about it. Let us know if you are someone that fits in that target audience section. I think that really impacted my view of the overall game. I tried to be as objective as possible, but it was just one of those games where more things annoyed me than tickled me pink. So
yeah, totally agree. Yeah, we really appreciate you guys, all you guys who joined us for the game of the month, playing Lost in Random with us. We are excited for you guys to play this month's game of the month. So if you don't know what that is, go check out our podcast, and we announce it every week. So make sure you jump in on the podcast with us, and we appreciate you guys coming in and joining us for this review of Lost in Random, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Peace.
Later.